Not too bad for that. I think I'm more hungover too. Thank you. Thank you, Becky. And after this,
so it's actually kind of a nice day today, so you have a nice view of the city.
Hello, everybody. So good morning. Thank you guys for coming out, and thank you to Max and 343 for inviting me here. So my name is Dan Freeman, and I am a bass player, producer, and Ableton-Certified trainer. And I teach at NYU's Clive Davis Institute, where I teach Ableton Live, production with Ableton Live, and also live performance with laptops and instruments. So basically what today's workshop is going to be on is basically live performance techniques with Ableton Live, specifically kind of like incorporating instruments and controllers into a live set. Let me just throw this out at you. How many of you guys actually use Ableton for live performance? Okay. What's the... all right, I'm missing something. Cool. So what I just want to do is I just want to start really quickly with a little bit of my story about using Ableton as basically a live performance tool. And then essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from a very kind of simple set, like as in like the simplest thing you can do, which is pretty much like play back a track live, and just add kind of layers and layers of complexity to it. So just a little kind of idea, and I'll tell my story a little bit but at the same time talk a little bit about live performance with laptops. So I've been now in the city for this is my 21st year in the city, and I came here in like basically the end of 97, 98. And when I got to the city, I came down to be a session bass player. And I kind of fell in with a group that was doing kind of live electronic music. We were actually playing these electro clash parties across town at this place called Dawn Hills, which is long gone, although some of you old school people may remember it. And so basically in this group that in 1998, when we wanted to play basically electronic music or kind of like merge digital instruments with acoustic instruments, we couldn't use laptops. Basically what we used at that point was this guy right here, an Akai. It's 5,000 sampler. And the way we used this Akai for live was pretty much like the keyboard player, synth player, would bring this thing, put it onto the stage, pretty much at the beginning of the song, hit play, and the singer would sing, and we'd all play along to the song. And then the song would end, and people would clap, and then hit like another button on the keyboard and play the song again. So basically, this thing was pretty much, it was a great sounding instrument, but it pretty much had the functionality. You could do it with your phone now. It would pretty much be like going to your iTunes collection and hitting play, and then kind of doing a karaoke play along with it. So there really wasn't, on some level, if you consider what live performance is, and the way I would define it is, live performance is creating music for the space, for the people, for the moment. This was much more, I would say, something akin to kind of like DJing and playing along with the DJ, although we were DJing our own tracks. Now, a laptop performance in 1998 was was actually something that was so unusual that I still remember that there was a club, actually, you know, kind of Lower East Side called Tonic, and I don't know if any of you remember Tonic. From time to time, they would advertise like laptop performance, and it was actually like such a big deal. Like, whoa, it was like, we're gonna go check out a laptop performance. That we'd go down, you know, go down to the club, and a lot of times it would be just a person sitting there at a table with a laptop, and then more often than not, like about 20 minutes into the performance, like the music would stop, and then like the lights would go on, and that was the end. Because essentially with OS 9, again, for those of you old school enough to remember this thing, it's like if anything went wrong with it, like if the clock, you know, crashed, then like the entire system would go down. So basically you couldn't use laptops in 1998 as really as reliable performance tools. And so really between like these years, between 98 and I would say roughly around like 2004, 2005, there was really kind of like a revolution in how we use laptops for live performance. And I would say there's a couple, you know, it was a mix between Steve Jobs returning to Apple and then creating like OS 10, where suddenly, you know, the crashing like clock or random app wouldn't take down your computer. More powerful laptops, and then also the advent of Ableton Live. And so, again, many of you probably know this, but Ableton Live is the only one of the DAWs that was created by musicians. It was Gerhard Bellies and Robert Henke for the express performance purpose of actually making the laptop a performance tool. So here, like fast forward, this is now the year 2005. So you can see me there, I am on bass. And I was playing with this artist, Xavier. I was actually the musical director. And in 2005, what was happening is essentially the label system was was in kind of a state of free fall. Xavier was on Virgin Records, and we were asked to go play in Europe. But if you look at the band, we had a pretty substantial band. I mean, there's obviously Xavier, a couple background singers. You can't even see the drummer and the keyboardist, but I mean, we're talking about like 7 people. And so the label was pretty much like, there's no budget for that. We want you guys to go to Europe, but you're going to only take like 3 of you. And so they wanted us to actually go play at this club called Berghain, which at the time I had no idea what it was, but we're like, all right, we're going to go play at Berghain with 3 people. And so it had to be the singer. And obviously I was a musical director, and so I figured I'd put myself in there too, which left like only 1 person. And so what we decided to do was to basically go drums, bass, singer, and use Ableton to basically run a lot of like what the band was doing. In a sense, it's like, and that's the thing, it's like so much of this is now driven by economic necessity, and there is something to be said about the fact that you can, say with a laptop, like lower the amount of personnel within your group to something that economically makes more sense, especially in a time of like budgets that are just not what they used to for touring. So that's exactly what we did. We went over, I actually used Ableton for the first time live at Berghain. This was what our band became. So now there's only 3 of us. You don't see the computer running Ableton, but it was there as well. And so I guess like from 2005, I just personally became really fascinated in ways to how to incorporate, instruments like these kind of like acoustic instruments and a more live feel with the machine, with the laptop. Now, once again, what we were doing in this 2005, 2006 is essentially we were still doing what we were doing in 1998, except we were doing it with Ableton. As in like, we would like press play, a song would come on, we'd kind of like play along with the song, and the song would end, applause, and then we'd keep playing. So it was still kind of like a karaoke machine. And again, if we're defining this as a live performance, and there was, when I say karaoke, I don't mean this in any kind of way to diminish or denigrate it. I think like myself as a producer, there are times I still do a set where I love to play back tracks that I've produced. Almost more like a DJing and playing along with it, and that's totally cool and fine. But if we're defining, once again, live as music for, for the space, for the people, for the moment, it's not quite live. So from between 2006 and the end of the decade, I kind of partnered up with a drummer, and we basically just played a lot and exploring ways on how to make Ableton much more of a live performance tool. As in, could we, for example, do live remixing? As in, did we have to play the song just straight back? Could we just chop it into pieces and then kind of improvise with it? And so, anyways, what we're going to do today is I want to start with a very kind of simple set, as in we're going to go back to 1998 and just this is what you do with the playback, and then kind of from there make it more and more live until we get to the end, which will be stuff like live looping and incorporating kind of things that you're playing in the moment into the live performance. Okay. Cool. So right here I have a track that this is just something I kind of produced last year. Okay, cool. So now, this track, kind of the most basic thing that you're going to have to do, and I'm not going to really go into it in this particular presentation, just because, for the sake of time, is warping. Essentially warping, when Ableton was released in 2001, it's the one thing that it could do incredibly well was it could essentially do this. You could basically put audio into Ableton, and you could move the tempo without changing the pitch, or you can move the pitch without shifting the tempo. And so this is Ableton's process of warping, and it's using granular synthesis to really kind of line the tracks up to the grid. Now, once again, there's so many tutorials on how to do this well, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go into it here. But all I will say is that if you're going to perform live with Ableton, it's you just have to have just such a mastery of how to warp your audio, because that's just kind of the most basic thing that you're going to do. Okay, so now, imagine so here we've warped the audio, and I'm just going to go ahead and just warp this one very quickly as well. Cool. Okay. So now I have these two songs, and I want to perform them. And so the most basic thing I'm going to do is let's pretend that I just wanted to just take a simple controller and just launch the song, and again just kind of almost do it like I was DJing. Now, one of the most kind of basic things here I'm going to show you is, and when I kind of figured out this trick a long time ago, this, although it seems very simple, was a game changer. The first thing I'm going to do is here on the right on the master track, I'm going to use Command R, and I am going to just simply say, put the name of the song. So, Star in the Ghetto.
Dan, can you magnify your screen a bit?
Yes. Let me just. Cool. So one thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to simply write Star in the Ghetto. And then I'm going to write 117 BPM. Okay, so now 117 BPM. The reason you're going to do this is because, and again, this is kind of 101 in a sense playing with Ableton, is that if you write in the master track 117 BPM, it is automatically going to go to that BPM as soon as you launch it right here from the scene. So for example, like I have this one, Star in the Ghetto 117, and I have this next song, which is called I Mommy, at 120. So it's like here I could say, okay, I Mommy 120 BPM. So now if you look what happens if like, here's my kind of, my tempo, let's just say it was at 138. So if I launch Star in the Ghetto from the master, as soon as I launch it, you see it goes to 117. And then as soon as I launch this one, it's 120. Okay? So again, very basic. You don't, if you're performing songs that have different BPMs, then it's just like, the launch will instantly get it to the correct BPM. Now, so very basic, I'm just gonna like play those two songs. And so I'm gonna use just a very simple MIDI controller. And again, this may seem very simple for some of you because I'm just starting very easy. Just being a little bit unsure of what the level overall in the room is. I'm gonna just take a MIDI controller, in this case, this pedal that I have. So this right here is it's actually one of my favorite kind of live performance things. It's a Keith McMillan 12-step pedal. And just a simple MIDI pedal. And I'm going to just map. And so the map command, the MIDI map command in Ableton is Command M. I'm going to map the scene, so to just like one pedal right here. So this one, boom. And then I'm going to map the second scene to another pedal, let's say pedal 5. So once I do that, if I want to launch the first song, I just kind of hit pedal 1, and there's, Star in the Ghetto at 117. And then the second scene, so pedal 5 here, launches the next song. Cool. Okay. So again, pretty straightforward. If I just want to play back some songs, and again, you can do this with. You can technically do a live performance with just a very, very simple controller. Now, again, that's not very live. This is pretty much, like I say, this is 1998. We're just hitting buttons and playing back music. So let's make this a little bit more interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create within the track something called cue points. And again, this is kind of taken from DJing, as in one thing that you can start doing live with Ableton. Now, if I was just playing back audio like a DJ set, I think there's plenty of great software to do this. Why not use say Tractor, Serato, which are really designed to essentially play back audio like this. Where Ableton kind of starts becoming an interesting live performance tool is the whole idea that you can do things like remix this live. So I can, for example, divide the song up into pieces and basically decide in the moment when I actually want to kind of play back certain parts of the song. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, cool. So I'm going to take Star in the Ghetto, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just duplicate the scene, and I'm going to say Command D. So right here, just so I have 4 scenes now of Star in the Ghetto. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically assign kind of different, go into the clips and make them launch at different times. For example, let's say it's like the first one is going to be like my intro. Okay, so very simple. Like one of the things that gives you a lot of power here is notice that I'm going to launch this clip, and it's going to like just do that little kind of like intro start, and then it's going to basically end up in a 4-bar loop. And the 4-bar loop is essentially it's infinite. It's just going to keep going and going. Okay, cool. So now the second one, the next one, I'm going to kind of start it from another point here. Let's see. And I'm just kind of randomly just picking points. So I'm just going to go right to the words. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is, once again, I'm going to start from a point, which is the beginning of the vocals. So here I'm going to call this, let's say, like intro, and I'm just going to just do 2 of these. I think you get the point. And this one right here, let's just say, call it vocals. So here I have like the intro part, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to map it to different parts, different buttons on the pedal. So it's like here I launch the first part of the song. So this is like the beginning of the song, and it's gonna go to a loop. And it's just gonna hang on this loop as long as I want it to. And then when I'm ready, I'm gonna move. So now it's like vocals. Cool. So like this right there is like, once again, it's like if you take a song that is like one of your songs, I mean, you can just using the technique. Notice that I'm always leaving a loop at the end. Because essentially, like by leaving a loop at the end, it gives me a lot of freedom to either loop this thing forever and like kind of read the crowd and see like, okay, should there be music here that's continuing, or to just move kind of as quickly as possible with that. So once again, it's like when you're dividing the song up into pieces, it's always pretty much like, start point, go, end, loop, and then next scene, another start point, loop, et cetera, until you get to the end of the song. Any questions so far? Is this all pretty straightforward? Okay, cool. So now we can make this a little bit more live. So now it's like, imagine I've, and again, I'm just going to leave it just for the sake of time at like 2 options, at 2 cue points here. So I can start now doing a live remix But I want to add a couple other kind of more live elements to this performance, so it's not just simply like, again, a playback performance. So this is kind of like my weird kind of like push instrument. And so as you can see, I've really hacked this thing up. But what I'm going to do is just very simple, which is like I'm going to add effects. Some just very simple DJ effects. So I have a DJ effect rack that I created. And it's called, very originally named Dan DJ Stuff. Okay, so right here, again, I can go to, oops. Yeah, this was like, I had, a friend of mine suggested this idea to me, and then I had an extra bass, so it's like I chopped the bass up and created this monster. All right, so here we go. Okay, so now, I've noticed that I'm controlling the essentially the effects with my left hand. So it's like, oops. Sorry, let me actually map that correctly. There. Et cetera, et cetera. It's just like, just by kind of like adding some effects, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to remap these the way I kind of am used to them. Like, just by adding some effects here, I can suddenly, start to make this whole thing a lot more kind of live. Cool. Okay.
What is metalize?
I'll show you. I'll show you in a sec. Like, I just want to. It's funny because I have this way, like, with this instrument, and I'll demonstrate this a little bit more later on. But like, where I've actually set up all of the faders to basically, so for muscle memory, that they're always going to do, kind of the same thing when I hit them. So metalize is just this weird kind of like effect I made. Sounds like this. So yeah, these are just kind of all things I kind of created. Okay, cool. So now it's like, and again, we're still kind of like, this is still very similar to DJing. It's like you have cue points, you're setting it up, you're just kind of like deciding when to move forward, you're affecting sound a bit with the effect. Now, let's start making this even a little bit more live. I think like kind of, in my experience, it's like you can kind of be doing as much as you want on a laptop. Like, as in, I could be sitting here like doing all kinds of complex stuff just with a laptop, and the average person would just still think I was DJing. It's very interesting. It's like, what kind of like for the audience, I find for people watching, what starts making something seem live is the appearance of instruments. And it's interesting because like certain instruments particularly will make something way more live than others. Like, I think the key instruments are actually vocals and drums. It's like, you can basically, I could do karaoke, but if I had a drummer kind of set up next to me, we'll talk about this in a second, then that would instantly turn into a live performance. Even though technically the drummer could just be, you know, playing karaoke, you know, playing along with the track. But for the audience, and it's very interesting because like when you do this, say in a club, like in a dance club, it's like and if you show up with a drummer, suddenly people respond to you differently. It's like they're not going to kind of like treat you as a DJ. They're going to suddenly just stand there and start looking at you because now you're presenting live music. But I'm going to start with something a little more simple, which is like we're going to go ahead and I want to go ahead and set up just a very simple kind of like MIDI instrument that I can play along with this track. So I'm going to just go ahead and create a MIDI track. And in the MIDI track, we're just going to like just add like kind of like simple codes here to the song. And I'm just going to go and just grab myself a Rhodes.
Dan, who made that instrument? And how did you get that?
Who made it?
What's that?
Who made it?
Yeah, who made it?
I made it. It's not like, whoa. Sorry, let me just shut this down. The instrument, like, I was touring last August. I do a lot of work down in Latin America. I don't know, I just... So I was like touring last August, and a friend of mine had just suggested it, and I don't know, I just kind of got, you know, I'm kind of nerdy, and I got obsessed with the idea, and I was like on tour and like just sitting there like drawing it. So I actually like drew it out before I put it together, and then when I got back to New York, I went to Home Depot and bought myself like a clamp and some Velcro, and like dismantled the bass and put it together. I mean, it's definitely not high tech.
What's it made of?
A Sadowski bass and Velcro and a clamp. So I mean, it's actually the for me, it's like what makes the instrument. Oops, I got to turn on this one, but I'm not really using it yet. The instrument itself is not. I mean, it's not particularly a complex thing. I mean, it's like anybody. You can take a stick and just put a bunch of controllers together, which is basically what it is. Where it actually becomes kind of like much more of a challenge, like as a live instrument, is the programming. And it's just like how do you actually like part of the goal in creating this instrument is. I don't want it just to be like, you know, like, I don't know, like an Instagram gimmick where it's like, everybody's like, oh, like, check out that guy, that, you know, that weird guy with like a bunch of lights on him. And like, snap. It's like, I actually want it to be able to create music and be musical. And in order to do so, to practice it in a way that like, to become virtuosic on it the way I would say, like, you know, on a bass guitar. So a lot of the challenge, and I'll show you more when I get to a live set, like my live set later on today, is actually, like I say, it's like the programming of how to get the instrument to actually respond and do what you want it to do. And that's like kind of like, I guess, the advanced aspect of this, but it's the construction of it was, like, literally took me about 15 minutes to throw together.
Do you practice it like a real bass? What's your approach to mastering? What's the name of it?
Oh, I don't know. I call it Blinky, like for lack of a better name. Yeah. I mean, I was an artist in residence in the fall at Berkeley, and the whole idea is that there was at Berkeley is creating a new program called the EDI program, electronic digital. Electronic digital instruments. So the idea there is that like basically it's like students can come to Berkeley now. You don't have to like basically play a traditional instrument. You can actually like do a master on like one of these kind of like new controllers. So I did a concert. I don't know. To be honest, like the way like I've kind of learned how to play it is like practicing classical music, like like Bach cello suite. Like doing stuff like that, like practicing Bach cello suites on it. To really get like, it's like kind of like right hand dexterity, and then, it's like any other instrument. Again, and like, my idea is that if I can get this thing to like be musical and to do kind of what I want, like this is just a prototype. Like I would love to actually have somebody actually, kind of do a more legit version of it that's not held together by Velcro and like tape and wires and stuff like that. But the concept though of the instrument is this. It's like basically it's like here. Is like music. Left hand is expressiveness through kind of like effects. I'm gonna just move these. Shoot, I should have put these in the master channel. Sorry, just give me 1 sec. It's like, so it's like here. So it's like it's expressiveness, left hand, music, right hand. So now I set up this as a MIDI instrument right here, and so now it's like I can do something like, as in I can like launch my track, kind of like my backing track here with the pedal like. Whatever it is, et cetera, et cetera. So now it starts really becoming kind of like much more of a live performance. And again, you don't have to do it on this. I mean, you could be doing the same thing, say like on a keyboard as well, with the with this. So that's like kind of like one way that suddenly you can start like making this more of a live, you know, kind of a live experience. Now, I want to just kind of like just show you kind of like two other things, which is like start incorporating acoustic instruments and also clip automation, which is like a super kind of important thing for playing live. So I'm going to just put this away for a second.
Did you have to make your own? Did you make up your own system for where the notes are on that?
No, it like I say, I'll show you. I'll take out my live set like a little later, but no, I'm using kind of the standard like Ableton push kind of like setup for it. Where you'll see is like on my live set, I have a lot more functionality for it, you know, and so much for my live set, I can just kind of quickly throw down ideas and loop them and just like kind of like build on top of it. And a lot of it has to do with like really treating this as an instrument, meaning that like, I mean, pretty much like what you're seeing, this was like, when I played live, this was what I had on a table. And it's interesting, like, I just never really liked having a live setup where I had a table in front of me. Actually, like, I hated it. It's interesting, I think like, you know, having performed live on one level or another, I mean, I started playing classical piano when I was 4, so it's like, I've actually been playing live since pretty young. It's like, and you know, I played as a bass player for years in all kinds of, you know, groups. But like one thing that I kind of realized as I kind of went into the world much more of like electronic, you know, digital instruments and you know, kind of like controlling laptops from these as opposed to like this, is that you guys may know like there's these kind of famous TED Talks on the whole art of like the power pose. And so for those of you who don't know, it's like if you need like, you know, a boost of confidence, I don't know, before a job interview or a date, it's like you stand like this and like Wonder Woman pose. And so the reason, but it makes perfect sense. Like why? Because it's like when you stand like this, like what are you doing? It's like you are actually like opening up your chest. And it's like, so you can breathe more deeply and you can like project energy out. And so what's interesting is that instruments naturally, like a bass, one of the reasons it probably looks so cool on stage is that look what it does. It like when I wear this thing, it like naturally opens me up. And so it's like, you know, it's like the chest is open and it kind of like forces you to arch your back a little bit. And so it's like more like a position almost of like command. Now, the problem is that with these, if you have a table and you're doing like a live electronic music performance, you end up like this. And this, to me, is like the exact opposite of a power pose. Because look, what happens is like you close up your chest and your energy now kind of like is focused inwards. So in a sense, like this was you know, kind of like an experiment in a way that, you know, it's like how could I take my live setup and like return it back into something that where I could communicate with other musicians and an audience and just, you know, have more fun in a sense than being over a table. Okay, cool. So one thing I want to add is I'm going to add a bass guitar here. Cool, and let me just get a little bit more gain here. Okay, so now, if you're going to go like, you know, again, we've just pretty much been in the digital realm before. And again, that's great. You can do some great stuff, just laptop, keyboard, etc. But again, I think part of like what makes live, you know, this was called the you know, acoustic and digital instruments. It's like how do you integrate these two together? And the thing is, it's like Ableton is actually an amazing processor for both acoustic instruments, like as in the bass, as we're going to see, and also for vocals. It's a very, very like powerful way of controlling the sound. And to do a performance where it's like you were launching, say, like backing tracks and like remixing yourself, but also like doing stuff like singing or in my case, like kind of like playing over the track itself. So I'm going to just show you a couple techniques on how to work with and this applies to vocals as well. I mean, the exact same kind of signal flow that I'm using on the bass would be the same if I had a mic and vocals. And just for the sake of time, I'm not going to specifically do vocals, but it's the same thing. So now, if you're going to kind of go this realm and start using Ableton to process your signal, then what you're going to need is a sound card. Now, the sound card is even if you're not going to do this type of looping, a sound card is a really kind of key element to your live performance setup. And for me, it's like the perfect sound card is stable. Like there's, as for those of you who perform live, and it seems like some of you do, there's nothing, well, I mean, I'm sure there are things less fun than having a sound card crash on stage. I mean, there's plenty of worse things in life. But it's certainly, it's not that pleasant when your sound card, when your just audio shuts down. So the stability is kind of like first, of first importance. And the second thing is actually the ruggedness of the sound card. I mean, it just has to be able to survive taking a beating in different situations. Which, in the studio, in my production studio, I use, say, like Apollo stuff, and it's beautiful, and it records perfectly well. But I want a sound card that can take a beating, that's always reliable, and also that's not like so expensive. Like, if my Apollo like broke on a gig, I'd probably cry. I mean, it's just like thousands of dollars. Whereas like this Keith McMillan right here, it's $600. So it's not the end of the world if something catastrophic happens to it. So the two classic ones are really kind of like the Motu Ultralight, but this one is a fantastic one too, which I'd recommend, which is the KMX, the Keith McMillan KMX. It's a really kind of great unit, and it's very, like, one thing I like about it is its interface. You can see stuff in lights, like they made it for live performance. So anyways, I have this sound card. One thing is I'm gonna go to Ableton's preferences. Okay, so here in the preferences, you want to go to the audio input and output devices. I want to set the buffer size up to probably like 256, I think, if I'm kind of taking in audio. Cool, so now you can, I'm going to set right here my monitor to in. Okay, in Ableton. So now it's like, I can play along. I mean, you can see there's like the signal is coming in into the channel. So it's like, all right, cool, I can play along with it. But now, where kind of like, this becomes interesting is like, imagine I want to like start processing the audio, as in like create two different sounds for my bass. Like one, like say like a standard, like bass sound, but another one like a little bit more tweaked out. So what I would do is I'm just gonna label this bass in. Okay, so I'm going to take an audio effects rack. So audio effects here. And in the audio effects rack, I'm going to create 2 chains. So I'm going to like do, one chain with like a bit of distortion, let's say overdrive. I'm gonna like EQ a little bit. So I'm just getting kind of more of like upper stuff. And then I'm gonna maybe give it a little bit of a ping pong delay and reverb. So it's almost more of like a I'm just going to take down the distortion a little bit. Actually, I need a saturator instead. Okay, so it's like I can get, again, it's like I can start getting some like very kind of like more interesting tones out of my bass that are like that aren't maybe like classic bass, you know, kind of like classic bass tones. Cool, so I have that chain, and that's chain 1, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a second chain. So right here in the audio effects rack, I can just create a second chain, and this is going to be a dry chain. So this one, and so in order to do this in the audio effect rack, I go to the chain view here, and I'm going to kind of stretch these out so that they're not, in a sense, it's like they're not going to overlap. So I'm just going to call this like effects. Okay, so right here, when this chain selector, this kind of thing up here is on effects, then it's going to get that very affected sound. But look, when I move the chain selector, you know, it's like, then it's like the dry of the bass. So now what I can do is, and audio effect racks are just incredibly kind of like powerful tools for production and performance. I'm going to go right here and open up the macros. Okay, and when I open up the macros, what I can do is if I right click here on the chain selector, let's say like mapped macro 1. I'm going to call this right here as chain selector. We'll just call this like sound. So here, if I have the knob basically here to the left, you know, then again I have the sound. But if everybody see that? So now, so this knob right here is now controlling the sound of my bass, the instrument. Now, where this becomes super useful is, and in a sense very powerful, is that you can, within Ableton, for live performance, if you're doing vocals or you're doing instruments, it's like you can have like a sound person inside of the computer automatically setting up the sound you want for the instrument at the moment of the song that you want it. So meaning that, like, for example, like you can say like in a verse, I want like this vocal sound and you know, even guitar sound, whatever you have like going through the laptop, like I want this. And as soon as you launch that verse, like Ableton's gonna go boom, like set it up so you have like the proper, say, like vocal sound for the verse. And then as soon as you hit your chorus, boom, it's like you can like basically get it to instantly go to another sound automatically without you doing anything. And so the way you do that is this thing called clip automation. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to, and this is like a very useful function in Ableton. It's like when you have the monitor in right here, if I were to put a clip, like just copy this clip right here and put it into the track, notice that it's basically, it's grayed out. It becomes what's called a dummy clip. You cannot hear it, but the kind of the utility of it is that it allows you to automate things within that track. So for example, on the first part of the song, let's say, you know, what I can do is I can go into this clip, and if I go right here to the automation part, I can go here to audio effect rack, and this right here is the knob sound. And I can set the knob so the number 34 means it's going to be to the left. Make sense? And so I'm going to do then the opposite here on the second part of the song. So for the second part of the song, also going to go to the automation and then make it so that, in a sense, that the knob now turns to the right. So listen, it's like when I launch this first scene with the introduction, it's going to have one bass sound like. And so whenever I go to the next part, does that make sense? So it's like one scene, has one sound, the other scene has another sound. Everybody, any questions on that? Now, it's a super powerful. I'm just going to give one example with vocals, and I myself am not a vocalist, but I will. I did a workshop actually with Tunde Adebimpe from TV on the Radio, and where we basically used him as kind of the example of a vocalist. And so I just want to show you this video very quickly, because you'll see he's actually singing, and as he's singing, it's vocal sounds are changing, delays are being launched, reverbs, et cetera, et cetera. And I think he demonstrates it way better than, say, I could, certainly as a live vocalist. So let me just set the sound up here.
Most of what I end up writing is about how, after being out of everyone in our band, I was the least tech savvy. I just wasn't interested, in a lot of ways. And then for some reason, 2 years ago, I guess the shift was I was
Okay, so what we're doing is basically he's singing. Everything is purely live.
I still my ordinary life. Passion is a crime, so hard to bear. Now is an extraordinary time, and we are fortunate to find here to share. Now I'm confessing there's nothing more that I wanna do than to stand right here with you, hold you so close. Because I know it's enough, even more than most, and I
So what was going on is essentially it's like we're using clip automation. So if you listen to like even like individual words that he's singing, you can kind of like hear that he fires. There's a delay that like a delay will fire right at the word. You hear that? So that technique is like all of that is clip automation, and exactly kind of what I just showed you, which is that when you launch different parts of the song, you know, you launched kind of different clips, which will basically switch up the effects within the track. So, any questions? Yes.
Yeah, just make sure so you're mapping it to the audio track, backing track, right? Even though the audio effect that modulates like the bass or the voice is on the track or the bass.
No, like so. What I'm doing is I'm taking the clip, right, and anytime you have a track that's set monitor to in, right, it's like when you set a track monitor in. It's basically you can put a clip into the track and it's not going to play. And so the mapping is basically in the automation of that clip.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
The clip is empty.
The clip is empty.
Gotcha.
Exactly. The clip is just there to control the whatever is in, you know, the effects in that track. And again, if you're a vocalist or an instrumentalist, it's basically how you do, you know, any kind of like sound changes or vocal changes. Yes?
Is there a real bad noise coming out now when you change the sound card over?
Yeah, I don't know.
Videos, I think whatever you do in your videos.
Yeah. Weird. Okay, let me see if I can.
Gremlin.
Yeah. Hold on a sec. Let me see if I can take that. Here, I'm going to just take it out of the. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know how it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's a setting. I mean, yeah. Sorry. Apologies for that. Cool. Any other questions before I just move to a couple kind of other topics? Yes.
So if you wanted to record what you were performing, say you're performing what you're performing just to get the song right or something.
Yeah.
You have to bounce it to another track. Right?
Yes. Oh, okay. If you wanted to record, yeah, then you would have to. Exactly. Probably like what I would do is I would set up another audio track and take audio from. Exactly, and just kind of like record it in that way, is how I would do it. Cool. Any other questions on this? Okay, I just want to do just two, because I just want to make sure we have like time for questions. And there's like one really, really important thing that I want to do, which I really want to leave you guys with. I don't know if I'm going to get time to talk about routing to drums. I'll come back to it if we have time, but I want to show you kind of like one like really, really important thing, and then I'll come back to that thing again. So one of the most important things, I want to talk a little bit about live looping. Okay, so now again, it's like if I have this, you know, by this point, you know, like this performance. Sorry about that. So like this performance, obviously, you know, if an audience sees me probably playing like, you know, now it's becoming much more live, especially if I have a drummer. Okay, cool. But once again, if we're moving towards the goal of, excuse me, live performance being music for the moment, for the people, for the space, then it's like, how do you start creating music without playback? In a sense, like moving away from everything we've done so far has been like ways of manipulating like kind of audio playback. But how can you like create music like right there, like instantly? And so it's like, if you kind of like are going in that direction, eventually you'll probably end up in this when you're dealing with a system like this, you're going to end up in the realm of looping. Now, there are various ways to do this. You can use like Ableton's Looper, for example, and people have great techniques with Ableton's Looper. For me personally, I'm not a huge fan of Looper for various reasons. I mean, one of the most basic is that you cannot shift the tempo with a looper without affecting the pitch. And for me, that's a big problem because I do like manipulating tempos. So the way that I do looping is with this language. I create loopers within Session View with something called CliffX. And how many of you have ever heard of CliffX? Okay, so just two of you. CliffX is the most, for live performance, it is like the kind of way to go. It is, if you look at kind of the performance sets, and I've kind of had the opportunity to see some of these of like big spectacles like Broadway shows or et cetera. I mean, it's all about CliffX programming within Ableton. And so what CliffX is, it's a script. So it's not like a max patch, it's not a programmed kind of like plugin. It's actually a script that you add to Ableton. And you can get it for free, or there's like the pay version, which is like $40. And if you're gonna perform live with Ableton, it is just an absolutely worthwhile investment. So what I wanna do is so imagine this. Let's say it's like I wanted to actually record. I have, and I'm going to use this other song right now. So I have this song here, I'm just going to create a loop here. Okay, so it's like, yeah, I mean, I can play along with this. But what if I wanted to loop something? Okay, so now, if I wanted to loop something or record audio, let's look at all the steps that are required. I would basically have to, I'm going to here put the monitor back to auto. I would have to basically select the track, like so. And then obviously it's not working. So because what I would have to do is then arm the track right here. And then I would have to actually just hit this. Okay, and then I have to stop the recording. So it's not really practical. I mean, as you can see, there's no way I can do this in a live performance setting until, without CliffX. Now, let me show you what CliffX, how CliffX will enable me to actually create a loop here. It's so the way you program CliffX is you install it, and notice, I don't know if any of you, are that obsessive that you pick up kind of very small things, but notice that there's a blue rectangle in my Ableton. This shows that CliffX is actually installed. And so what it is that here, when you have CliffX installed, you can basically do programming within Ableton itself. And so I can basically, within this CliffX track, I can create a MIDI clip. And again, the MIDI clip is not going to have anything in it. It's just kind of like a programming clip for CliffX. I'm going to put it down here. I'm going to just go here and shut down these. Okay, and so here, I'm going to do a couple simple commands. So in order to program CliffX, I'm going to put ID. Okay, now that's going to tell Ableton this is a CliffX clip, like ID in brackets. And then I'm going to say, okay, 3, because notice that the bass is going to come in here. 3 cell, which means that that's going to select, essentially select track 3, which is the first step. So now watch this. It's like if I hit this. And when I program a CliffX clip, I want to, in the launch, make sure that it launches like instantly. So none. So watch. When I hit this, look what happens. Everybody see that? So watch. Let's say it's like I have this track selected. Everybody see track 1 is selected? Look what happens when I launch this clip. Everybody see that? It instantly selects track 3. So now, remember, the other thing we have to do is arm the track. So I'm going to say 3 arm. OK. And then I'm going to pick a slot to record in. I'm just going to get rid of these. And so I'm going to say, OK, 3. OK. 3 cell 1. OK, so this will select clip slot 1. Everybody see that? And then I'm going to say, I'm just going to have it play. So 3 play like that. And watch this. Oops. No, actually, no. Sorry. 3 cell 1. Oh, yeah, that's right. OK, 3 play. OK. Everybody see that? Now, there is, OK, so now the last thing we've got to do is like we've got to basically stop it from recording. So we've gotten this thing, so that I can record. So the way I would do that is I would use what's called a follow action. And I would say right here in the clips is that after, let's say, like 4 bars, it's going to go to the next, the next clip down. And then right here, I'm going to create a new CliffX clip. And this one, I'm going to say 3 arm. So what it's going to do is it's going to shut the record arm down. And look, watch what happens. So now it's going to record for 4 bars. Everybody see that? And so now what I can do is I can just like MIDI map a button here to a CliffX clip. So it's like, so I have, I'm just, it's playing. I'm just gonna take the monitor in. Sure. Cool. So I want to just so I can because right now, in a sense, this is becoming loop 1. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new track. And this new track is just going to be a monitor track. OK, and so this one I'm going to always set to monitor in so we can always hear it. And I'm just going to take the audio here from the monitor track. And OK, like so. OK, so here. Sorry. Oops, my mistake. I wanted this in the loop track. So let me try that again. Here we go. Everybody see that? So it's like basically like what CliffX is allowing me to do is one button push on a controller. to actually record within Ableton's session view. And the great thing about it is, like, not using the looper is that, like, if I want to, you know, I can now like adjust the tempo to wherever I want it, and it's going to kind of like keep, you know, it's going to basically keep the pitch of it. Does anybody have any questions on CliffX? Yes.
So if you wanted to have it record multiple loops, would you have to make a new CliffX program clip for each time?
Yeah, so what I would do for multiple, and like what I'll do, and again, I'll show you right now my own live set, and you'll see this, is I actually create different, however many loops I'm thinking of having. Let's say it's like I want like 3 loops at a time. At some point, like, I don't know, for me the loops get like unwieldy. But like, what you do is you just duplicate this and say like, okay, 4 select, 4, you know, 4 arm, you know, do the same commands but with 4 and then with 5. And so for each looping track, like, here, I'll just demonstrate. So I'm just going to create here, just duplicate this and call this loop 2. OK, so right here, so loop 2 is 4. I'm just going to copy these clips here. OK, and here, I'm going to just add it like just a new. Everybody see that? So it's now, it's like, once again, it's like. Now, let's say it's like I want to loop something else. And what's great is that you can now control the volumes, like, especially if you're looking at it on the on the push or something like that, of each one of the looping tracks. And it's great because you can now mute one, like, you know, so it gives you so much more control as you create kind of a looping set than Ableton's looper, like I find. Yes?
One of the other common setups I've seen is just people just get like a looper pedal or something like that.
Sure.
Is the side of that is that you can't change the tempo without changing the pitch for that? Or?
Well, with the looper pedal, again, it can work perfectly great. I mean, there's kind of like no wrong or right. It's like whatever works for you. But I think it's like the nice thing about doing the looping within Ableton is that you can like say like synchronize all the effects within Ableton to the loops. So it's like, you understand, it's like if you have a looper pedal and it's like set to a certain BPM, it's like you can't have your delays perfectly synchronized. You understand, stuff like that. But it's a totally legit flow, and I know some really awesome, I've worked with some great artists that do that, and it's totally fine. But this is just like another kind of flow, if you're going to just use Ableton as your looper.
Yeah, it seems like CliffX is primarily solving that like tempo change issue, like tempo sync.
Yeah, I mean, it's for the tempo syncing, but also, you know, it enables you just to operate without an extra, like, piece of gear. Yes.
Do you use CliffX for other things? It seems like you got open-ended.
Yes.
Things you do
Yeah.
in terms of, live performance automation.
Yeah, let me show you. I guess let me kind of like wrap this because I want to. And again, 2 hours is so short. I mean, we could go on and on and on about live performance. I just want to show you. Come back to this instrument because actually this whole instrument is actually based around CliffX, like CliffX programming. So let me just actually pull up the set with that I designed for this thing. I think it's this one. Yeah, CliffX is, like I say, if you look at like the programming for like major spectacles and like, you know, syncing Ableton with visuals and lights and all this kind of stuff, like for like Broadway or like, it's all CliffX programming. I mean, it is so powerful. Basically what CliffX allows you to do is to, anything that you would have to do, use a mouse, your hand and a mouse for, it enables you to get away from that and to basically, you know, customize controllers so that one button suddenly does like multiple things. And so when I kind of like built like this instrument, like as you see, I have like looping built into the instrument itself, and all of this is like CliffX programming. I'll show you this set just quickly. Okay, so this is my live set here. Now, if you look at like so this is a set that I built, and the whole idea was that I wanted to be able to like, you know, as we talked about at the beginning, I wanted to something really live, as in like, could I like create songs that were like, or create music that was like, you know, that was like literally I was just like creating loops and just throwing together stuff. And so if you look at my kind of set here, it's kind of nuts, but here's my CliffX programming. I mean, I have so much CliffX going on. All of this type of stuff, you know, it allows me to change sounds and very quickly. So the way this instrument works is like, the way it kind of like I kind of conceived of it is that like this right here is this is like to launch. And like here is like I can do sonic destruction. Now I can select different sounds here. So now if I want to loop, yeah, I mean, like all of that stuff is basically, it's powered, like the loops, you know, and like the instant kind of like program changing and sound stuff is powered by CliffX. And so something like that, like I say, it's like to be able to start with beats and then, I don't know, just kind of like improvise with loops and stuff like that is, you know, that, like I said, we started with the very simple kind of like playback of audio, but to take like, you know, just kind of a sound and then come up with something like I just kind of like did like right off the bat. I mean, for me, that really kind of like gets the closest to live. I mean, for better or for worse, and like CliffX is such like an integral part of that. So do you guys have any questions over some of the stuff I kind of threw out there? Yes.
Thanks for putting this all together, Dan. First of all.
Oh, thanks.
What if you hit a bad note and you, like during your looping, can you go back and fix it?
You can't necessarily, I mean, you could. It would totally kill your flow. I mean, technically, a lot of the looping I'm doing in here is MIDI looping. So meaning that, like, yes, like I always have the option to, but I would have to like go in there and do it. So what I actually would do is, I mean, I can like quickly kill stuff. So the way these buttons work is that like top is loop, second is select, and like third is kill. So it's like say, so I can like select this, I can quickly delete it. So now it doesn't even, now it's not there. Like here's the drums. But I can pause the music. You know, now it's gone. You know, so yeah, I mean, I'm just assuming that for live performance, again, it's like I have more leeway, and so if one note is weird or off, it's like, you know, hopefully no one's going to notice it, you know. But yeah, you can always, I always have the option of hitting delete and just re-looping it if I need to with the instrument. Cool. Yes?
I was wondering, is like mixing and like a big part of your like prep in terms of like whether you're going into with remixing a track that you already have or with like doing a full live setup?
Yeah, I mean, it really like so much depends on like the actual like set I'm gonna be doing. For example, like sometimes I'll do a set that's much more like, you know, like I do a lot of disco house, and so it's like, you know, so it's almost more like a DJ set where I'm just playing bass along with that. And so that's like one type of set. And so in that case, it's like, it's much more like what we talked about before. I'm just going to decide like the cue points where I want that set to, you know, to kind of like exist at. You know, and then the other extreme is like, you know, crazy like live improvisation sets where it's like one thing about this set here, and this is much more of a live improvisation set, is like, notice that I'm really not starting with anything. Like, so the loops and stuff like that like I'm creating, like what I am starting with like some like drum loops, but even there it's like there is like a randomizer built into it. So it's like what's called generative music, where it's like I'm letting Ableton throw out a lot of ideas at me. It's like so like there's like degrees of randomness in this, so that's not exactly the same every time, the loop. So it will like, it's programmed that like from time to time it's gonna like throw spit out variations and such like that. So in a sense it's like that's like another kind of like live technique to, you know, because loops themselves, I mean, that's another issue that, you know, we didn't really get into, but like when you're working with like pre-recorded audio loops, they can get really stale like very quickly. So like the whole idea of creating like something like generative where it's like you're getting Ableton to automatically put variation into it randomly, I think like makes it a little bit more interesting. But yeah, so a set like this, anyways, I'm going to start with pretty much nothing and then just kind of like build it over time. Yes?
Do you throw any effects on your master bus when you're actually playing live, such as compressors or anything at all?
Just a limiter, just to make sure it doesn't really like pop over. I mean, you can see right here is, I mean, yeah, I have the glue compressor. That's my master bus right there. So there's a limiter there, and then there's the glue compressor.
Do you have, because I'm sure everybody is different, how do you sort of set that up universally?
Oh, you mean the?
Like some rooms sound different, so maybe you want it more or less.
Yeah. I mean, if we have time, you can do an EQ. But I mean, if it's a room that's like big enough, like, at some level, you're going to hope that the front of house will take care of it, because you can't really from the stage. I mean, there's only so much you can really kind of like do or figure out, sonically from there. So, you're kind of like in the hands of hopefully a competent sound person. Yes. Cool. Yes.
What are you using for the randomization in the generator?
There's a couple things you can use for randomization. So one thing that I really like, and I mean this kind of gets into more like complex CliffX programming, is basically like follow actions with like percentages. And like if you set up like multiple, like, so it's like I have like follow actions with percentages, but for like various elements. So it's like, like the snare has like 1%, the kick has 1%, as you can see. And it's like, what it allows you to do is like suddenly will create, different variations. There's another great way to do it too, which is to make your loops not exactly synchronized. It's actually a great there's a great, like, if you really like, I love generative music. I'm really fascinated by like kind of the intellectual concept of it. There's a great talk given by Brian Eno in 1996, where Brian Eno actually talks about generative music and refers back to a Steve Reich composition called It's Gonna Rain. I don't know if anybody is familiar with it. Yeah, where it's basically two tape loops that aren't perfectly synced. And then it's like what happens is like if you don't sync those tape loops, it creates this incredible like kind of like sonic scape, because they are like off so slightly that then the whole tape loop itself is now generating, kind of whole textures. And so that's the same thing. It's like in live performance, it's like you create, I do this all the time, actually production too, create say a percussion loop that's like, I don't know, like 4 bars and a quarter or something like that, or something like random like that. And then like put it up against your other percussive loops, then suddenly it's going to like by itself create these like really interesting kind of like patterns. And so it's not gonna, it's another way of fighting the whole static idea of just repeating one loop endlessly.
And then you randomize the entry point as well.
You could, there's all kinds of ways like that you can do it. Like I think here it's like you basically set it right here in the follow actions. In this case, like for example, every 8 bars, like half the time it's gonna like go to another pattern, half the time it won't. But it's not like
start at the same entry point basically for this at least.
Yeah, it's gonna start at the same entry point on this particular one. But I mean, there's various ways you can explore randomization within Ableton. Like, and like follow actions are a good one. Like loops that are offset is another good one. Yes.
Yeah. Could you just elaborate on what follow action is and how to?
Yeah, so follow action, it's a really kind of like clever thing that, like in Ableton, basically, if you go to the clip launch section, and like you'll see like an equation, and like what the equation is saying basically is that like after 8 bars, and then after 8 bars, then there's an action and a fraction. So half the time it's going to repeat. That's what the up arrow is, and then half the time it is going to go to the next clip. And so what this is, it's not like every other time. It's more like, over like many times of launching this thing, it's gonna behave like this. Like so, like 1,000,000 times, like 500,000 times. Like, but it's not like every other time. And so you can set these fractions there for the follow action. Does it make sense? Yeah, and again, you can get super creative with it. Because if you have various elements with various follow action percentages, then suddenly you're creating whole new kind of like rhythmic ideas. Yes? Say. Yes.
Can you quickly talk through drum setup?
Just through what?
Through a drumming setup?
Yeah, I mean, mine's super weird and complex on some level. Like, it uses a lot of CliffX. Now, so what I have, and I'm just looking at, I have like multiple kits, and this is kind of like I say, for me, like drums and live is kind of really kind of like complex thing. I take the MIDI, like some MIDI patterns, for example, and the MIDI patterns are here, right? In these tracks in my CliffX area. But notice that I don't have a instrument here. And what I do is I send the MIDI information to another instrument. Now, there's a reason why I do this, and I'll show it to you in the breakbeat, because it's a little bit simpler. I mean, like I said, my drum thing is super, super complex, and just for the sake of time. The reason I do that is that, and put the instrument here, is this, look. Okay, so what's happening is that like MIDI in one track is now being sent into the instrument here. This is what's generating the sound. Like this is the actual drum rack. And the reason is that because you can put a random device in front of it and get more generative kind of loops. Does that make sense? So when I program drums for live, again, it's like I have like just the MIDI sending to the instrument, and then in the instrument I set up like a random device that I can then control, and that gives like a degree of randomness, again, for generative reasons, to the actual beat. Because otherwise, again, this is just a simple amen break loop, so it's static. But if you start like adding like a degree of randomness here, then it's like suddenly it's not going to be so static. Every now and then you're going to hear it do something like, something weird as well. So that's kind of like a tip on how I set up my drums for live performance. Yeah.
And it's multiple chains to switch between the type of breaks.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can have like, again, you can get super complex with this. So you can have different kits within different chains, and like use CliffX to go between like the different kits to get like different drum sounds, like with them. I guess it can go. You can go really deep into that. But yeah, because I like having some loops for the live performance, then just to start with, because for me to like, what I found like doing this years is that to actually like program my own drum loops like live is really, really hard. I mean, because the audience is not that, people aren't that patient as you kind of like throw down. You can do it, I'm sure, and I'm sure there's great flows to do it. So I like to have like at least the drums as like kind of like a basis to start with, and then go from there. But I don't want my drums to be so static. So these are just ways I've worked so that the drums have some, variation to them. Yes.
That kind of randomizing that you have for your drum and bass,
Mm-hmm.
amen break type of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Do you do a similar level of randomizing for like a house beat?
You can. Absolutely.
It's a different stylistic way, right?
Yeah. Again, and it's not like everything has to be random. I mean, like, for example, like I'll have the amen break maybe like a bit random, and then maybe less randomness in the actual like kick and snare, because like I also have like, because besides the randomness that's built into the beat, remember it's like I have like other ways to like kind of like sonically affect, stuff. So it's not, so I don't necessarily, plus I can actually drop individual elements of the drum itself. So I think like the important thing is to just not have a static loop, and like whether you want to make sure it's not static manually or programmed, it's like I just try to use both approaches to make sure it's not static. Yes.
Where do you find your range, like with the crowd? From maybe like BPM standpoint.
I don't know. It really depends on like what kind of show I suppose like I'm doing. I work a lot in Latin America and Europe too as well, because I spent part of the time living over there. I think like what I found is for different types of styles of stuff, like stuff that will fly overseas doesn't necessarily fly in New York. I found like in Latin America or Europe, like people are going to be way more open. Like, I'll do festivals of like just bizarre, experimental electronic music where I can just like, get up there and like try to play just the most like just bizarrely twisted noise, crap from the instrument, and like it seems to really like fly there. I mean, it's like some of these venues or some of these festivals, like if I were to just put on a simple house beat, I think people would get offended. So there's definitely, it seems like there's definitely more of a scene for that, and I'm not sure that has any kind of BPM. It's just like noise destruction. But I do end up I love drum and bass, so I do end up doing a lot of kind of like drum and bass that just becomes destructive. I think, if you're playing more like a club, like kind of something standard, like I tend to do, disco house, so it's going to be like, I don't know, 117 to like 128 maybe, like max. So, cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
Where do you see the technology headed 10 years from now, as far as multiple musicians collaborating together, and maybe they'll have their own rigs and be able to mesh all of this?
Totally. I mean, exactly that. Yeah. I mean, I think it's I had the privilege of working with Roger Lynn, who is, for those of you who don't know, he's the guy that basically invented the MPC and the Lynn drum, and essentially one of the inventors of the drum machine. And what Roger Lynn said is basically we're kind of right now we're in the dark ages of instrumental interfaces, meaning that we have these machines that create these incredible sounds and just do this incredible sonic stuff, but the interfaces that we're using are actually really primitive. I mean, it's just they're buttons essentially. I think I would say more and more I think the interfaces will catch up. I think there is still fundamentally such a desire to see live performance. It's just a kind of a human need. And meaning that person standing just at laptop with one controller is not very interesting. So I just think more and more is going to be the new interfaces, exactly as you say, multiple people on stage, integration of traditional instruments. I just don't see it going going anywhere, and hopefully these will become much more expressive, so that you can actually I don't know, sing with them in a sense, rather than just having just a bunch of buttons. So, cool. Yeah, great. No, well, thank you guys so much for coming out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan. Wonderful to have you here and to share your knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And please stick around. We have an open house now where we'll be giving you a tour of the space. You can probably ask Dan a few questions on the way out. We have if you want to learn Ableton Push, we have our Ableton Make Your First Track course starting on the 24th of this month, where you'll learn to make your first track. It's kind of a course designed from the ground up. In fact, we have some of our students here, so if you want to ask them, that's Barney. He's almost done with the course, and we have the advanced Ableton course taking place right now in the back. You can peek your head in the door. Anyway, you'll be covering a lot of the stuff that, well, maybe not the very advanced stuff, but you will be learning how to use the push at least. Yeah, and as I said, we also have mixing classes, songwriting classes, theory classes, and synthesis classes. And Nacho here will be here, I'll be here, and Ross will be here. And we also have we're currently running a 20% discount on all classes until next Friday. So this would be a good time to sign up. And if you want to review anything that Dan did today, it's going to be up on our YouTube channel at 343 Labs within the next couple weeks. So you can always check that out. And please tag us on Instagram or social media, 343 Labs. Thank you all so much for coming. It really means a lot to us.
Yeah.
Peace out.